If I can question my state of mind persistently and with a wish to find out exactly what is going on in my mind, if I can question it rightly, I'm off to the perfect start in thinking in a totally new way, which I can't presently imagine and which I cannot presently do. So I want to ask you a series of questions tonight, which you in turn must ask yourself daily, till you see it so clearly that there will be an action out of the very question. A clarity because you have answered the question for yourself. And the question is this: what happens when a confused mind operates? Just think about it for a minute. I'll go quite slow so you don't miss it, so it's not so simple you pass over it. What happens when a confused mind goes into action? What happens when a confused mind tries to make a decision? It can even be confused over the smallest decisions of everyday life, about your work, about your family, about your health. Let's start at the very beginning and see with such real clarity that there's an action there. See that a confused mind can only produce more confusion. Now, is that too simple? Look at it. Look. A confused mind can only produce more confusion. It can't produce anything outside of its own nature. If I really see this, if I really see it, am I going to continue to think and react and live the way I always have? If I really see it, not at all. Something will come to an end, something I couldn't imagine have existed before. Okay? I want to be what? I want to be happy. I want to be secure. I want to feel accepted. So I make decisions about how I'm going to be happy, how I'm not going to be afraid anymore. I make all kinds of decisions. I'm going to make a lot of money or have a lot of friends or get married or get unmarried. A confused mind making a decision will always come back where it started. Haven't you every once in a while, say about once a month, had the feeling that you've done all this work, read all these books, taken all these courses, done all these things, met all these people, and to your astonishment, if you've seen it, you're right back where you started. Nothing has changed. But because I have a confused mind, and one of the attributes of a confused mind is to lie, I now think I'm what? Happy because I'm married, which is a falsehood. Happy because I'm unmarried. No, free because I'm unmarried, which is a falsehood. Secure because I'm surrounded by all these things that I thought would give me security. So a confused mind will lie, and that blocks me from seeing The fact we're going to talk about tonight and see with clarity that if I have a mixed up, muddled mind, there's only one thing to do. I can't make any intelligent decisions in my confusion. I can't do anything but get deeper into it. But there's one thing I can do. I can see it. I'll tell you whether you know, whether you have a confused mind in this room right here tonight. I'll tell you whether you know you have a confused mind. If every day you know you're confused and you stop operating to correct it on that level. Because you see the futility of trying to think your way out of anything. Which is a terribly shocking realization. To see that I can do nothing. Worse than that, there is no person there who is thinking who can do anything for me. Which realization is this jungle we're talking about? And on the other side of it is what I wanted, which I thought I could find with thought, which I never have found, but is now something that is not in thinking at all. Okay? I'm unhappy, I'm afraid of death, I'm afraid of life, I'm afraid of other people, I'm afraid of my own madness, for heaven's sake. I'm afraid of what I'm going to do to myself next, what stupid involvement I'm going to get mixed up in with that woman, with that man. I'm afraid of what I'm going to do to myself, because I've done it often enough, have I not? And I don't know how on earth I managed to escape and get out so easily. I could have gone to jail, or I could have ended up a suicide, or even murdered. Sure. Because of my insanity. So I see all these shocking things about myself, and so I decide that I'm going to find God. Certainly everything I've done up to now hasn't worked, so I'm going to attend religious classes of some kind. I have no idea what kind. Or I'm going to go to a study group, or go to church, or read a religious book, or read the philosophers. I'm going to find God. I'm going to change myself. Nothing has happened. Again, nothing has happened. Because I'm going to find the kind of a God that in my self-deception and in my fear of the ending on myself, I'm going to find the kind of a God, in quote marks with a small g, that will permit me to be religious without being decent. Right? Religious without being decent. Philosophical without being good. To walk around as a quoter, as someone who's been appointed to help others now that I've helped myself. And when I become hardened in that, practically all hope is gone. This is a fact. This isn't negativity. This is a fact. Having been hardened in that, having been hardened in my religious beliefs, in my self-deception of thinking that I am now different, You'll never get through to me. All right. We're here, among other things, not to make that mistake. Not to make the mistake of identifying with any of the good and right ideas that we get here. And we do get good and right ideas. Come back to the original thought that we started with. I have a confused mind. I have confused emotions. I have a confused life. No matter which way I turn, I run into a question mark, and I don't know what to do. And I'll ask someone else, even in the smallest of matters, I'll ask someone else what to do. Or I'll stay and be in a state of alternating contradiction. Do you understand what that means? Do you live that way, emotionally and mentally? A state of alternating contradictions, which is broken occasionally by what we call good news, which is simply a thrill. Again, nothing has happened. All right. I just don't know what to do. I don't even know the right people to ask to help me solve my problems. And thank heaven if you've even come to that stage where you see that no other person can answer your questions for you. You still believe? You still believe that someone can help you? We better apply that to this group. Do you know what helps you in this group? Huh? I will tell you, and I'm telling you, this is the third to last meeting of the year, and I'll tell you, before we go into the new year, I'll tell you what happens in this group, what helps you. Truth itself. Don't you know? Don't you sense, don't you feel that God himself, I know how this sounds, but I also know it's the truth, a fact. Don't you know that God himself is helping you in this group? That is the right atmosphere in this room? I know it is. Don't you know that? Okay. Now, that is not on this level of muddled ideas, concepts, beliefs, opinions that we've been talking about. Not at all. There's no way on earth any of us can think our way out. We can only go in a circle. Now, do you understand what has to happen for the circle to come to an end? I am the circle. You are the circle. So if you're tired of the squirrel cage running around, very simple. I'll state it to you very simply. You have to come to an end. That means idea comes to an end. That means frantic thought about finding God has to come to an end. That means vanity thought about having found God has to come to an end. That means thought that any other human being can help you has to come to an end. That means thought that tomorrow you understand will have to come to an end. And every time you end one of these dozens, hundreds of false thoughts, incorrect thoughts, the wheel, the squirrel cage, slows down just a little bit. Which is the same thing as consciously going through hell. A of experiencing, astonishingly enough, of experiencing your own extinction. But what is extinguished? Nothing real. What is extinguished is the idea that I am something built by ideas, which is the squirrel cage. And that is confusion. This is why no matter how hard I try to find the answer, to feel secure, to feel elated, to feel happy, no matter how hard I try, I always fail. Because I haven't seen the one fundamental fact that I can't do it on the level that I've been trying to do it all my life. How many years? 20, 30, 40? You know, if indeed there wasn't anything else, then there might be cause for despair. If this is all there was, this chasing around, this being afraid of people, take that all by itself. Being afraid of people. Take the hell of that all by itself. If it was necessary for me to live in this world afraid of you, afraid of a relative, afraid of a friend, afraid of strangers, if it was necessary for me to live this way, then life would indeed be perpetual hell from day to day. Oh boy. There really is an answer to it. You don't see it yet. I'm telling you, I'm telling you two things at once, so you don't get confused on that and get all mixed up. You don't see the answer yet. There is an answer. We can state the answer, capital A, in a certain way by saying that it consists, you'll understand this, I know some of you will. The answer consists of me, of you, of me coming home to myself. You understand by this time what separates you from being yourself, who you really are? The thought, the idea, the belief, the conviction, out of which grows the vanities, the compulsions, the hostilities, the anguish, and the whole slyly sinister way of living that we've had up until now. During this coming new year, we're all going to work very hard to see what it means to come home to myself. Now that's very simple and that's all right. That's good to put it that way. As long as I don't make the mistake of thinking that myself is what I've always thought I was and what I have to have, because that is not it at all. When I say myself, when you say you, me, you make a very strong, deliberate effort to say the word consciously. Say I consciously. Then I will be a totally different thing, and there won't be any attachment in it, and there won't be any problem in it. If I say I consciously, that means this. That means when I say me, I'm using it on the level of words, but knowing that I'm doing it, and therefore it doesn't go any further than that. I say it for the convenience of communication. I will meet you at 12 o'clock at the store. Now we know that we're supposed to be there. I'm referring to this and to you. No problem there. The problem being, when I say I and think that it means something connected with all my experiences, my attachments, my labels, and think that that is real, which it is not. You know why it isn't real? Because it vanished 1 second ago. It vanished, I vanished, what I called me, vanished 1 second ago. But I recreate it, perpetuate it, by thinking I again right now. So, look at the secret. Are you following? See the secret. If I can drop the thought now, the I thought now, with all its attachments to the past, drop it now, then I am not here now. Therefore, I'm not troubled now. I have no decisions to make now, except on the everyday level. That is mental clarity. I see the thought, I understand, I'm watching my mind, I drop the thought. You say something that offends me. Because I'm a mechanical machine, I say, I am offended, right? The next second I say, I am offended. The second after that, say, I am offended, therefore I have a right to offend you back. So we have a fight. I keep saying, I am right in this fight. And I can prove I'm right in this fight. And I can hurt your feelings. And I can tell secrets I know about you. Then I will feel better. This is what is known as mental madness, keeping me in place. And this is how we have lived up until this point. In total confusion, in misery, in pain, because we have not understood all these fundamentals that we're talking about. Now, we're going back again for the third or fourth time. If I can become clear, that I have a confused mind, am I going to rely on that confused mind to straighten me out, or do I see that it can't work anymore? Therefore, I'm going to have the courage to not use it anymore. Courage. You're going to have a lot more than you now have, because you're deliberately putting an end to yourself, quote marks, to yourself. You're deliberately putting an end to all your artificialities. Now, doesn't that make you very happy? That you won't have to be in conflict anymore with yourself, and therefore you won't be in conflict with any other human being on earth, regardless of how he or she has treated you, or is treating you, or will treat you? How's that for a right aim, a right goal? Now back again. You say to yourself, no, comma, I'm not going to depend on this way of thinking anymore to solve my problems, to make me happy, to give me a feeling of security, to make me feel wanted, to lower my fear. because for the first time in my life, I see clearly that it doesn't work and it can't work. It can't work. So I'm not going to waste one more minute trying to make it work. It won't, so I'm dropping it. What takes its place? That is what you're going to ask. You find out. This is where you have to leap into the dark. You find out what happens when you no longer choose something that'll make you happy or secure, that'll make you be someone, that'll protect you, that'll give you the advantage, the psychological advantage over someone else. You find out what happens when you refuse to do it any longer, when you refuse to fight. You find out what happens to you when you refuse to fight. When you do this, you'll be like a person. I'll describe the experience to you, then you'll understand it. And this is right. It's all right to explain it to you, but you'll have to go through it. When you start to do this idea of dropping all your ideas that you know the answers, which are only ideas, you'll be like a man out in the middle of a vast prairie. All of a sudden he finds himself there. He doesn't know how he got there in the first place. He does know that he wants to get out of there because it's dry and there's no water and it's miserable and lonely. And he's standing right out in the middle of this desolate prairie, and he turns in a circle. He looks to the west, no sign of civilization there, no city, no telephone pole. And he turns in the opposite direction, just bleakness there. This is tremendous if you get to this stage where you don't know where to turn, where you don't see anything, where there are no answers. I congratulate you if you get to this stage where you're out on the prairie and you don't know what to do next, and just stay there. I'm going to end the illustration there, but you take it up until that point where you used to know all the answers. Remember all the answers you had? So clear, you preach to others. You preach God to others. You preach moral standards to others. You told them all about politics, how this would be a better world if they voted this way or that way, or if they took this philosophy or that philosophy. Remember all the answers you used to have for others and for yourself? What an enormous, painful, sick lie. The lie begins to come to an end when I'm out there on the prairie and don't know which way to turn. The lie begins to come to an end. And so does my hell. So does my anxiety to prove something to you, which never succeeded anyway. Thank heaven that will go away, and it will. Finally, we're going right back where we started. And I'll stop. It is necessary for each one of us in this room, and those of you listening to this tape, to see the utter futility of using ordinary thought, conditioned thought, acquired ideas, fixed opinions. It is futile to use them in order to feel in a different way, in order to feel happy. I can feel a thrill, but I can't feel who I really am. And there's a big difference in that. If I see the futility, I give up, and something else enters. And I will tell you now that this something else will enter. And that something else will guide you perfectly without any decisions or effort on your part. Because now you and truth are one. Illustrations and the figures of speech can be very helpful. They exist, by the way, only on the level of thought, of idea, of imagination. If I give you the illustration of you standing in the middle of the prairie not knowing which way to turn, then your imagination goes to work. Imagination being a form of thinking, is it not? And so you have an idea of yourself standing there in the prairie. Now, that's very helpful. On that level, that's good because it helps you to understand the whole thing of what we're talking about. Carry the illustration a little further. Once you leave the prairie, once you're out of it, is there any thought about it at all? You don't think about it. It's gone. Why think about it? You have nothing to do with it. Change it just a little bit. You're in a hospital. You're ill, and you're cured, and you go home. You don't think about the hospital anymore, do you? It's not on your thought at all. So, if I have gone through this psychic cure, do I ever give 1 second worth of thought to how badly I was treated either yesterday or 10 years ago? Or do I even think about how badly I treated another person? Is that on my thought at all? I have seen this whole thing that we're talking about. I've escaped it, to put it that way. Now I'll ask you a question. You can answer. Try. What does it mean in these teachings to be out on that prairie, completely bewildered, not knowing which way to turn? What does that mean? What are we talking about? It's a very valuable state to be in. Why? Very simple. I'm out on the prairie. I'm lonely. I'm depressed. I'm afraid. I feel abandoned by God and man. In my fear, I look in any direction, and believe me, it's purely accidental, whatever direction I turn in. I turn toward the north, turn north. And I see something in my mind that I think is the rescuer. The civilization, the handsome man, the pretty girl, the wealth, whatever I picture in my mind as being the rescuer. And it isn't at all, not really, because it's still a part of my own thought, my own idea, my conditioned ideas of what will make me feel secure. And they're not real at all because they're the mirage, are they not? Which as I advance toward them, they disappear. So what if I stay there without looking in any direction at all for an answer, grabbing something to make me feel less afraid? If I stayed there, what would happen? This is an illustration, and I have to stop at a certain place or it'll go wrong. But what happens if I stop looking? I end the vision. I am afraid there is the man who will rescue me. Or I'm afraid there is the career that'll keep me from thinking about my fear, and I won't feel afraid anymore. I am here to be rescued by that, whatever that is. If I stop counting on that, depending on that, what happens? I disappear. Right? Right? No? Yes? I will be rescued by that. I no longer seek that. How can there be anything here if there's no one seeking it? If there's no seeker depending on that to save me, is there anyone to be saved? You're going to have to think harder than you are. But in order to keep me in place as a seeker of God, as a wise man, whatever I identify myself as being, I must always seek something over there to, quote marks, affirm it. If I have the courage to give up and stop seeking out there, who is there to be saved, to be rescued, to be affirmed? Isn't it simple? But isn't it hard to give up? Because I'm giving up me. And I don't want that at all, because I'm afraid of death. That's it. I'm afraid of the death of me. I don't care how sick and miserable and filled with hatred I am. At least I'm me, I think. Have you ever noticed that you can never get rid of the doubt? Right? It nags you no matter what you do. It nags you. Death occurs when I stop saying that is my rescue from the prairie. Then the whole idea of me being lost in the prairie, which needs to be saved by whatever I see out there, the whole thing vanishes. Everything vanishes. Now, in that state, where is your problem? None. This is the state above thinking, above idea, above the idea of being rescued. If I ask you who needs to be rescued, you're going to have an awful hard time trying to explain to me who there is to be rescued, because you're going to use ideas, but you're not these ideas at all. So I will sit here and listen to you describe an illusion. If you stop describing the illusion, would there be anyone there? Would there be anyone there with a problem? Would there be anyone there to be lonely? The reason, we explained this before, the reason you're, okay, how many are lonely? Let's get it established. How many get lonely? How many feel lonely? The reason you get lonely is because you say, I am lonely. This is much deeper than you can imagine. If thought wasn't operating, I am lonely, you couldn't be lonely. That's the thought, the idea. The only you have is the thought, I am lonely. If you didn't think the thought, would you be lonely? You wouldn't even be there. And when you're not there, how can you be lonely? How can nobody be lonely? Comments, questions? Juan Lillian.
When you said this is deeper than you think, loneliness.
Yes.
I know that it's a fact. Because as you know me, Vernon, I didn't think I was lonely, but I was a lonely person. But when my family turned against me, then I knew where I stood. And I see it and hear it. If the challenge is given challenges given where I have to give up certain friends, I see the depth of my loneliness, which all us human beings, we have not found the truth, or we're lonely.
And afraid.
I'm afraid.
Really.
The paradox of the mind, I'm afraid of death, but what I won't see is to the exact degree that I'm afraid of death, I'm afraid of living. I wake up every morning afraid of what's going to happen. And yet, I don't say that, I just say I'm afraid of dying.
Correct. They're both connected, are they not?
One thing I've noticed very clearly, that when we're out in the prairie and we try to resolve our aloneness, as you say, we search for God, every religion has an enemy.
Yeah, yes. Do you want to explain that a little more? That's true.
Well, when you're alone out in the prairie, the way to escape, of course, is to keep the image of yourself going so that you go look for something. But the reason that you want to persist in this image is because there is an enemy to fight.
Oh, yes, yes. There has to be some enemies out there, and friends, but both in quote marks.
And so consequently, you never do anything intelligently. You're always driven by the enemy. To the
Or by
same
your
goal,
friends.
or whatever, yeah.
Your friends can be meaner than your enemies. Your friends are your enemies. But your enemies aren't your friends. We can't win. Leland.
Two comments. One, Rod and I have very clear grounding, very clear experience in the diabolical nature of organized religion and its actual effect, which is to deepen the sleep, which is to promote the person who supposedly has found the way and therefore is more lost than he was before.
Correct.
And the other thought is that when the I goes, the state of freedom is also one of entertainment. That is, life life is something that's merely going on.
Okay.
It's merely flowing along, and we're observing it.
Okay.
It's
Nothing to do with it.
nothing that we're responsible for.
Not really. Not really. Bruce.
I was thinking is when you mentioned the friends and enemies, actually it's better to have enemies in a way because they don't have nothing to do with you. Your friends will build up your ego and actually they're destroying you worse than an enemy would.
Right. An enemy can destroy you too if he is an enemy to you. Can he not? Your enemy can destroy you too, of course. As long as you say enemy, he's destroying you, but you're doing it yourself. Last night we talked about confused thinking. Now let's think a little bit more specifically about one characteristic of it, which is compulsive thinking. Think about compulsive thinking. Think about how difficult it is for you to sit down quietly, either by yourself or in a room full of other people, sit there and think of nothing. Which does not mean that your mind is blank or empty or stupid or anything like that. but simply that the mad, rushing freight train isn't tumbling down the track 100 miles an hour, out of control, and with no purpose at all. Look at your own mind, at your own thoughts, and see how utterly purposeless is most of your thinking. There is purposeful thinking, which is on the practical level where I have to think about my business, or you have to think about cleaning the house or whatever. That is purposeful. It has a good result to it. Have you ever done this when you're driving your car and able to do so? Just watch the madhouse of your own mind. Then ask yourself why you're in this state, why you're out of control, why you're made nervous and tormented, whether you're aware of it or not, by madhouse thoughts. No purpose is served by it at all. And the reason we're in this state is because we have not used our minds properly on the elementary level to observe our own minds and put an end to this way of thinking, which can only wear us out, can only make us compulsive in our words, in our actions, in our whole nervous system, compulsive, which will then radiate itself and spread itself to everyone else around you, which, by the way, is a form of lack of conscience. Punishing yourself by not being in command of your own mind, you will also punish everyone around you, because they're absorbing the atmosphere that you are spreading. And here's two people punishing each other in themselves because they haven't understand that it is not necessary to be in compulsive, reckless, self-destructive thought. You sit down sometime quietly by yourself and simply try to think of nothing at all. Don't think of anything at all. And see how difficult it is. See how the minute you sit down quietly, the mind races off in this direction, goes that way for a while, races off in this opposite direction, then in a third and fourth direction. Nothing is happening except racing thought. There's no construction to it at all. Unless you see this as an elementary lesson, there's not much point going on to anything beyond that, because you won't realize the basic problem. The problem being that the essential you is not in control of your thinking. The whole you, capital W-H-O-L-E, is not in charge of the part of our psychic system that we call thoughts. Rather, thoughts have kidnapped us, so to speak, raced away with us so that we're not at home at all, not really at home. Why is it so difficult for you, for me, to sit quietly as an exercise and as something quite beneficial in itself? It's quite restful, quite relaxing. Not at the start. It's quite nerve-wracking at the start, because your mind is protesting the sudden break in its habitual activities. Why is it so difficult? Elementary. This is all I've ever known. No one ever told me. I've never understood that it's not necessary for me to deliberately, because I'm unconscious about the whole process, torment myself, remain in a nervous state all day long, all night long for that matter. Nightmares being a part of compulsive thinking, connected with emotions, connected with desires. It's just one major point, and this is what I'm going to leave it with you. because you'll have to get point 1 before you can go on to point 2, which maybe we could take up at a later date. All right, I ask you the question. Are you at least somewhat aware of how you can't stop thinking? Yes? No? You can't stop thinking. Doesn't it drive you mad? You see that. Then we can go on to the next step. If you sit down and try this exercise, do notice the shock it produces in you, how uncomfortable it makes you. You stay right there in that chair or on that sofa and come back. Now I'll tell you what will happen as an elementary revelation. For the first time, you will be in a battle that is somewhat conscious. All the rest of the time it was just completely unknown to you what was going on. Oh, you suffered from it. You felt the pain, all right, of worry, the pain of worry, which we discussed. But the first time you'll be conscious of the battle. And that is great gain in itself. Because I'm seeing the horrible state in which I've lived all my life while calling it something else. Now, what do you suppose you and I and the world call this madhouse mind? When I mention a few of these, you'll understand. Fervor for God. My mind works in a so-called religious way. I called it fervor for God, for being a Christian, for being a religious person. This is compulsive, religious, self-destructive thinking. And now, you know how one way you can detect it in yourself or in someone else? I don't really think I have to tell you this. The frequent repetition of pat phrases, words, which the mechanical compulsive mind repeats over and over and over, and the individual saying them calls this religion. It's a dreadful thing. I would say it's an especially dreadful thing to be caught in religious compulsion. When you sit there and become aware of how your mind is racing off, your thoughts are tumbling over each other, you make, as best you can, and it'll be very difficult, a resolution, as we said last night, to come home to yourself. Because you're not with yourself when you're carried away, when you're kidnapped by all these thoughts. What are they? Find out. You look at them. Irritability, resentment over someone else's behavior, fear of your own madness. Just look at it. Then, and I'll give you a clue. As you keep bringing yourself back and back and back and say, I am not going to let this thought carry me off. This is the same thing. This is the clue. This is the same thing as dropping thought, which produces a great shock. And you know why, because we discussed that last night and before. In the absence of thought, I am absent. I am not there anymore. And this is very terrifying at the start, because having so identified with all my thoughts, thinking that they were me, I sense that the end of thinking is the end of my attachments, of my identifications, of my demands, of my phoniness. Even my phoniness becomes very valuable to me, and that will play a very important part in compulsive thinking. Deceiving you, deceiving myself first, of course, in order to get what I think I need from you. With practice, with work, with persistence, I can catch that thought when it arises, drop it. Now I'm free. One split second later, if I'm new at this, one split second later, the next thought will come up. And I can drop that. Then if I have no thoughts at all, except practical thoughts and cooking dinner, that's okay, or driving the car. Then if I have no thoughts at all, how can I have any problems at all? How can I have any hurt feelings at all? How can I have heartache? How can I have sorrow? You tell me. You can't. Because wrong thought has created these, and comprehension of the wrong process, comprehension of it, which is the same as dropping of it. As I drop it, I see it. If I can catch a glimpse, I learn how to drop it. Where's the problem? I said this was going to be a summary, and it is. Listen. No one in this room, and no one in the rest of this world, perpetuates himself from moment to moment. I perpetuate a pseudo-identity by the process of keeping compulsive thought in place in my mind. And it starts with I. Remember we had that last night? I am a certain kind of a person. I mean, it's either flattering or it's critical or whatever. I am a certain kind of a person. I have an idea, a thought of what I am. I go out into the world, and everything relates to this false sense of self that I have. Every contact with you, with society, with my employment, with the opposite sex, everything connects with this false sense of self, I, which already is going to cause endless trouble. Because the I is fictitious. It doesn't exist, but I think it does. Therefore, I'm going to relate wrongly with you and with you, because I'm going to use you to keep it going. I haven't seen the fundamental error. I haven't seen that this is not an I at all. Therefore, it doesn't continue from moment to moment, except as wrong thinking, compulsive thinking, neurotic thinking, mistaking thinking creates the illusion that I persist from moment to moment. If I see this, that thought itself has wrongly created me, I can drop thought, drop the illusion, drop the artificial self. Right now, I am now in the right relationship with myself, and therefore with all of life. You, I, do not continue from second to second. That is thought, that is time, that is the persistence of an illusion. I dissolve the illusion through seeing it, through understanding. Now you tell me where I have any problem whatever. I said any problem whatever. You tell me. I have no problems at all. Because this fundamental error of I, in quote marks, has created every difficulty that I've had. Then, when this whole nature, this unified nature, this essence, goes into the world, meets you, and meets society in its madness, I, the real I, God, truth, essence, cannot be touched. Because thought was the contact, the wrong contact with the world. I am free of the world. Because my illusions was what put me into false contact with it. I'm not involved anymore. But I understand. How can I be touched by a world that I'm not living in anymore? How can I be injured by the expression on your face? By not making as much money as you? How can I be injured by seeing that I'm growing older? If false thought doesn't operate, there is no problem. Do you see the enormous importance of understanding this, of working on it every second, of making all the connections you can in reading the books and in coming to these classes? Because the whole thing will vanish all at once. The whole problem. Which is the same thing as saying that I, in my lack of understanding, comprehension, was the problem. So finally, why don't we work on the whole problem, work in the right place, so that we don't go from solving one little everyday problem, like getting married or getting unmarried, or getting new employment or moving to a new place, and thinking that we've solved anything. Why don't we do the one thing that will solve everything, which is to solve the problem of myself and nothing else? When I solve myself, I solve the world. Wouldn't it be nice to live in a state of inner being where the world can't touch you in any way at all? Not because you've retreated, but because you have died to illusion. Because wrongly operating compulsive thought is not running out into that world asking, what can I get? What can I get to prove that I'm a nice person? What can I do to prove that I'm a success? What can I do to feel accepted, to feel loved? This is compulsive thinking. I drop it, I cut it out. I am one with myself and one with the world. Someplace, is it the New Testament? I guess it is. Christ said, I have overcome the world. This is what he was talking about. He had overcome the world. We're here to overcome the world, which is accomplished by seeing that the world is right here. My world, your world is right there. That is the world I overcome. When doing that, I overcome the total universe, which simply means being sane. I have no contact, no attachment to the insane world. As far as I am concerned, listen, as far as I am concerned, it is a sane, whole, healthy world. That is my state, therefore my world. So now we work hard. Look at the terrible state people think they would be in, maybe us. Think of the terrible state people think they would be in if they had no questions, if they had no strivings, if they had no problems to solve. Wouldn't that be awful? Wouldn't it be awful to have the answers so that there be no more questions and no more You try to take the problems away from a human being. You try to take away his agitation. You tell him, sir, madam, you may know the truth that sets you free. Are you still under the illusion that he's interested in that she wants that? You mean to tell me that I have to give up my fighting, my seeking for God? One woman wrote me a letter, and she underlined it and emphasized it and exclamation pointed at it. Yeah.
Both.
She said, I must have the answers. Oh, what a good time she was having in this agitation of demanding the answers. Are you willing to be without the strained question? The strained question, for example, how can I find truth? How can I solve my problems? How can I get over my misery? You have your misery because you love it. And there's no other reason. Well, there's something in back of it. That's the fundamental reason. You love it because you're afraid to be without it, because your eye is invested in misery. How many of you feel persecuted? Juan feels persecuted. Joan feels persecuted. Did Rod feel persecuted? This persecution, I understand, does not necessarily come from another person. You can call your persecution the conditions of life. You can say this mad social system has persecuted me. And when you say that, you're telling me that you are part of the madness. You're contributing to it. You're part of the insane world, complaining against the insane world. When are we going to have the courage to not scream for justice, to not scream for answers, to not scream for rescue? Well, aren't you the most important human being on earth that everyone wants to persecute you? Everyone wants to hurt your feelings. Everyone wants to deny you your rights. Isn't that wonderful to be the center of the universe? Now you know why people don't have the answers, because they do not want the fundamental answer that we're living in total illusion about who we are. Nobody wants to give up their seeking for God. You stop seeking God and watch what happens. How's this for a strong statement? You will be God. And in that, there is no vanity, and there is no sickness, and there's no misery. Why don't you give up seeking God? But connect this with everything we're talking about here so you don't make a mistake in understanding what that means. If there's no seeker, is there a God to seek? If there is no thought, I must find God, is there someone to find God, or is there a God? And in the absence of that, there is God. In the absence of thought, in the absence of idea that I must find truth. When that goes, there is truth. How many of you love your desperation? You love your desperation? That is what is keeping you from being whole, from being sane. Your love of your own desperation. That is what makes you mean, by the way. Makes you cruel to people. That is what makes you different from your behavior in this room than your behavior at home or other places where you have power over other people, everyday level power, authority. Are you different in behavior out there than you are here? Huh? That is division, is it not? That is playing a role. Then, in case you're confused about it, if you're whole in yourself, if you understand, if this is clear to you, then if you go out in the world and you're the boss of the construction crew, or the manager of the apartment, or the head of the corporation, you will play a role consciously, so to speak. It's not a role, really it's not a role, but I'll use it put it that way. But you'll be conscious that you'll be doing certain things in that business. You'll be sending out advertising. You'll be advising the bookkeeper how to handle things. You'll be running that business quite consciously. As far as you're concerned, it's simply a way to make a living in this world with no ego gratification at all. Nobody will know it but you, I guarantee you. Nobody but you will know how you're really living internally, right in the middle of, Jim, let's order 50 boxes of refrigerators. I think we can sell them. Tom, let's paint the building green this time instead of blue. It'll last longer. Let's get a high quality paint. In the long run, it'll pay off rather than get a cheap paint. We live in this world, right? So we have to buy paint and refrigerators. But we know, among other things, that we're not going to live in this physical body forever. So I could let myself go from being the president of the corporation. I can let it go anytime because I've let it go already. Then who can touch you? What can touch you? What can harm you? What can harm me? How can you ever be rejected? How can you ever be slandered, ridiculed? What happens to you if people laugh at you? Or if you think they're laughing at you? Maybe they are, maybe they're not. What happens to you if you think they're laughing at you? That they think you're a fool? Boy, that's a test. That's a real test. Especially when your friends do it. You hear them say something about you behind their back, behind your back. Okay? Anything? Oh, I know a summary thought. One of Sally's favorites. Instant recovery. That means I drop the thought the minute it tries to take me over. The feeling that tries to take me over. Instant recovery. Right now. I'm not going to perpetuate, I'm not going to seem to perpetuate this illusory self with all its rights and demands and good looks and youth or maturity and wisdom, whatever. I'm not going to perpetuate this illusion anymore. I'm going to drop it right now. I'm going to put an end to myself so that I can become sane. So that I cease to torture myself. How about that for a direct statement? So I cease to torment myself as I have been doing in the past. And what has tormented me? Not you. My own madness. My own responses to you or to the world. Look, you make up your mind on this next to last meeting that you will do anything to find the truth that sets you free. You'll do anything, you'll sacrifice anything, you'll go through anything to get out of the mess. Get emotional. Rightly emotional. I don't care what I have to sacrifice, what I have to give up. I don't care what blows to my vanity I have to endure. I'm going to do it. I don't want to do it, but I'm going to do it. I don't want to. Who says I want to do it? I don't. But I'm going to do it. Heaven help me. I'm not going to waste all this new knowledge that I've acquired in this class, in the books, any books that I've read. I'm not going to waste that knowledge. I'm going to put it to work out there with one aim in mind. Regardless of what my wife or husband wants to do, regardless of what my own madness insists that I do, I'm going to get out. Get out of the mess. Get out of the jungle. I don't care how scared, how terrified I get of doing it, I'm going to do it. You say, I don't care how, you're talking to your own mind, you understand, this is a figure of speech. I don't care how terrified I get, I'm going right ahead. Which means, if I get my feelings hurt, I'm not going to go along with that anymore. I'm not going to love it, I'm not going to enjoy it. I'm not going to let it perpetuate the false feeling of self. Not anymore. And I may get my feelings hurt. Oh, but I'm getting smart. Am I not? I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it instead of falling victim to it. This is powerful stuff. Okay. Now you can talk. Yes.
Because said several times in other meetings that the young people, or myself, have a lot of hope yet.
Yes.
And this is a block in itself. Would you go into that? How do I drop this hope? Because I can feel it.
Right, right.
At least, well, maybe in a couple of years, I will get what I want.
Yeah. You understand, of course, that it is not wrong when you're young, or any age for that matter, it is not wrong to think properly toward your life here on earth. You certainly must take care of the physical body, for example. It requires work, does it not, to get money to buy bread. Try to see that it's not wrong to use your mind where it's right to use your mind. How else can I put it? To do the necessary things on the everyday level. Try to see, let's see if we can work this out. Try to see where thought begins to identify, begins to operate wrongly in saying that I must have this or else, see? Because then we become ruthless and get into demands of what I might have. Besides, don't forget, you live in a world where everything happens accidentally. You don't control it. Look, you have an ambition to become a certain thing, right? There may be 1,000 barriers in the way, and so you never achieve being a doctor or whatever you plan to be. So where's the problem if your mind operates rightly by understanding that you would not have gained a thing by becoming the president of the company? Then you know what you do? Instead of earning $10,000 a month, you earn your $300 a month. Where's the problem? Some of you may be comparing yourself with some of you young people may be comparing yourself with older people who have succeeded, so to speak, on the everyday level. Maybe they have a little money, maybe they've succeeded in their business and achieved something on that level. And that is becoming your problem because you are thinking you must imitate their success. Why should you imitate their success? It may come. It may indeed come. You may indeed make a lot of money. So what? So what? How long are you going to live on earth? How long do you think you're going to live? As one point? We even think, we're so deluded, we even think that we can take it with us psychologically. If I become famous, if I become real famous, 50 years after I'm gone, they'll play films of me being a certain senator, or they'll have films of me being an actor or whatever, and therefore I will live on. Or they'll put a big monument to me somewhere, a statue. I will live on. See the illusion? Who lives on? Who lives on? Thought persuades us that I live on. Oh. One, I'll use the word difficulty, is that we have 1,000 things centered toward this one thing we're trying to find, which is simply that we're living an illusion but can put an end to it. We have 1,000 different thoughts, ideas, which can contribute to it. If I stop wasting my mind in useless thought, which we discussed this morning, I'll make a little more room for this right idea to come in. We discussed during the break the idea that certain spiritual literature takes on a whole new meaning when we make certain advances, and we really see the meaning of it, what was really meant, the higher meaning, the authentic meaning of it, where before we thought it was just religious talk, which we taught to other people. We thought we were Christians.
It would seem to me that Rudy's question somehow is phrased in a confused sort of manner. That is, if we're talking about hope with respect to the world, we're talking about something that we believe we as separate beings can get from the world, something that we can possess, that will distinguish ourselves and our existence, that I can get this position or this amount of money or this whatever. So that it seems that the way that the falseness of such hope is exposed is simply to look at the hope itself and its object and to see, as we're going through it, as we're going into something, how does that affect me? How does that change me? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know how to say this any more clearly.
No, that's all right. All right. Maybe we can tackle it from this viewpoint. Now, you think of your own life, as I say this. I'll think of me. I gain something. What do I gain? You name it. A big raise in pay, a promotion in my work. I get a new home. I get a new wife or a new husband, a new friend. I get a big compliment. I get written up in the paper. If I'm asleep, this will fall on my vanity, on my egotism, and will give me a thrill, right? A thrill. And of course, I want to tell everybody else about it, because that adds to it. Because you're probably jealous, but you pretend because you're doing this. All right. If I can see that this is a thrill instead of me, a thrill, an excitement. I can see that is not me at all, but a negative emotion parading as success, passing through me. And if I can detect it and learn, as we said before, to drop it, then that is not contributing to I anymore, is it? And just look at the advantages, to use that word deliberately, that I'll have from now on once I see this. Will I be a compulsive worker, for example? How many, you heard the old story of the man who brings work home every night because he can't stop working. He's a compulsive worker. He's afraid to stop working. I'll work a lot better, by the way, afterward when I see all these things. If I can see that a hope, a thrill, and excitement is simply a movement and not me, but I've identified, I feel good. I feel good. Tomorrow, how are you going to feel, Juan, how are you going to feel? Go ahead.
But
Yeah.
when I really look at it, I don't really feel good at all, because in this looking, in excitement and dejection are exactly the same feeling, the same tiredness, this same psychological turning, the same anxiety. And when that is seen, I'm willing to give it up, this excitement.
Excuse me, if I see it, yes. Sally.
That's how people look at Christmas and New Year. They want a thrill, they want an excitement. And if they don't get this thrill, this associated Christmas spirit, then they feel rejected.
Yeah.
You know, it's no different than any other day, but we've been taught we must have this certain feeling at Christmas time.
Right. You're supposed to be happy or whatever.
Supposed to be happy.
Peace on earth.
Yeah. Sure. So it's an artificial atmosphere, isn't it? Phony.
The key to the artificiality is this so-called idea that you've stated, namely that we ought to be up, that we ought to be happy. So it is a perpetual battle which is self-defeating because it's opposed to nature. Nature is always our enemy as long as we're trying to do this, to cling to it, milk it for its last.
Look at the strain. Let's look at that word strain. The strain, tension, nervousness, tension. I achieve a certain kind of success, any kind of success. I achieve it. I'm in tension the minute I identify with this success, which I say I have. I'm in tension. Why? Because, you pointed out, on the natural level of things, that there is the natural opposites. My business may boom. I may make a lot of money one week, and the next week it's gone. All right. This means I'm at the mercy of the natural opposites. Therefore, I have made a demand that God shouldn't be God. Naturalness shouldn't be naturalness. Self-defeating. It can't happen. I'm not going to change God. God isn't going to bend to my demand, to my wish, to my ego demand. Not only that, but I have to surround myself by people who think as I do, who will compliment me, who will flatter me. It becomes a big deceptive club